Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gurna Vasya Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Vajo Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Vajo Bande Gura Shri Vigrara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanma Diramarjanado Shri Vigrara Nana Juktasya Bhaktamsa Neyunjatapi Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Bande Gura Shri Charanara Chaturvedha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvedha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Kridvaiva Trupti Bhajata Shadeva Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Shiradikama Bhavayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Swa Dhanalalupasya Bande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Dhanalalupasya Bande Gura Shri Charanara Ne kunja yuno rati kelisidhai jayali bheri juktir apekshaneya ne kunja yuno rati kelisidhai jayali bheri tatrati daksha Ativalavasya Bande Gora Shri Charanara Vrindam Sakchadharitena Shamasta Shastre Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Sadhavi Sakchadharitena Shamasta Shastre Kintu Prabhorja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gora Shri Charanara Vrindam Kintu Prabhorja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gora Shri Charanara Tasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Tasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Tasya Prasada Sada Tasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Dayam Stubham Tasya Yasatri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Dayam Stubham Shastri Sandhyam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Nama O Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama O Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Patsatari Shatarine Namaste Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Vatsatari Shata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavi Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaya Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govindaram Shimadusudam Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Shri Radha Nilamadhava Radha, Nilamadhava Radhe, Radha Nilamadhava. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jaya Jagannatha, Baladeva, Subhadrama, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman, Sitaram. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanandi, Jayam Vishwara Paransa Prabhajaka Acharya, Astutara Sarvishimad. ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapakachar Vaishnav Sarvamani Gaura Piyajana Krishna Prima Bhakti Data Patita Pavana. This one case, Avacharvina Bhakti Viranta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patitu Udhari Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Jivan Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Jayananta Kuti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Prem Si Kaho Si Krishna Chaitanya प्रभु नित्यानंद श्रद्धेत गदाधार शिवासारी गौर भक्तवृंद की जय जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रणाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद निष्मन गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गुरु हरिमा वरनाय अवतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जय की जय युग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद मृदंग 29 बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय तेलोशिव श्री श्री राधा नीलमाधव की जय श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय परम करुण श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम कित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्वविघ्न अविनाशन करुण सिंहदेव भगवान की जय जय गंगा माई जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय बोलो श्रीमती राधा रानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय लादलाददायिने हिरण्याकाशीपूर्वक्षः श्रीलटं कानखालाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बहे नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं दे तव कर कमलवरे नखा अद्भुत शृंगार दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गा केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवद्रिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद जय भक्त प्रह्लाद नित्य गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल राज हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौरा हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव। विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंह स्वामी भगवान की जय। भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय।
श्री वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रिययै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारेरे सतवत्तये नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रिययै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारेरे सतवत्तये नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसी देवै प्रियै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रद देवी शतवताय नमः। जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियसी नमो नमः।
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा भाव अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा तव अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा भाव अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पव अभिलाषी।
चितमारा शरण लो तारा वंशा पूर्ण हो।
जे तुम्हारा शरण लो तारा वंशा पूर्ण।
कृपा गोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी।
तुम्हें कृपा करी कर तारे वृंदावन वासी।
मोरा विलास कुंज दियो वा।
विलास कुंज दियो वा।
नयने हरि वो सदा युगल रूप राशि।
अमी नयने निवो सदा जुगल रूप राशि।
ऐ निवेदन धारो सखीर अनुगत करो।
ए निवेदन धरो सखीर अनुगत करो।
सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी।
सेवायादि कर दिए करो निज दासी।
दीना कृष्ण दास कोई ऐ जिना मोरा होए।
दीन कृष्ण दास कोई न मोरा।
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेम सदा न भासी।
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सरय नवासी।
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेम सदा न भासी।
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा नवासी।
ज्ञानी कानी जय बाबानी ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pade pade
Jani kani sapapani Pramatani kanisha Kani tani pranasanti Pradakshina pade pade
jani kani jai babani brahmahatyadikani jai tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pade pade
Jani kani sapapani Brahmatani kanisha Kani kani pranasanti Pradakshina pade pade
jani kani jai babani brahmahatyadikani jai tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pade pade
Jani kani sapapani Brahmatari kanisha Kani kani pranasanti Pradakshina pade pade
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
Nitai Gaura Deva Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Deva
श्रीमती वृंदा देवी तुलसी महारानी की
Jai Shri Vrindai Tulasi Bai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataye Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Bai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataye Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satavataye Namo Namaha जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय। O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of his wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always be wholly beautiful, pastimes Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavadams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid-servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love, Shri Radha and Govind. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrindadevi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam ki jai. Chaito Darpanamanjanam Bhava Madhavam Nivapanam Shayakari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vatu Jivanam Ananda Buddhivardhanam Padiparam Purnamrita Sadhanam Sarvatmastam Param Param Jai Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Ita Drishitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam Idrishamya Jani Nanuraga Trinadapi Sunichaina Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namana Dena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Shundarim Kavitam Vaja Gadishaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmani Shari Bhavatar Bhakti Rahaitu Kitwai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Vishrame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tabapadu Pankaja Sitaduli Shadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galora Shrudharaya Badanam Gadagadharudaya Gira Purakai Nichitam Bapu Kada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Juga Itam Nimishena Chakrusha Pravrusha Itam Shunya Itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahena Me Aslishva Padratam Pinashtumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Thava Vidadatulam Pato Matpranatastu Saivana Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam ki jai. Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gurti Shri Namo. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire condition of life for repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the primary benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction movement. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can rain the all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord and strong in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the lotus feet. O my Lord, Or will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Or will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling old, vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he sure remains so, even if he sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he's always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikyastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods, like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To reserve the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It was so an offense to be ignorant to what chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are for the compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Vancha Kalpatarvascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Paritanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavendra Ki Jai. Mangala Charan Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakchurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jota Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Dalita Shri Vishakambitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nivrishesha Shunavadi Pasatyari Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shivar Shabana Videvi Daitaya Kripabdvaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurjojala Premadhya Shirupa Nuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shimurtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Virudhapa Siddhanta Dvantarine Namagora Kishoraya Sakchavera Gyamurtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Parabhujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sakchit Anandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupa Nuga Varayate
Gauravir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Tuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhakta Namahami Bhakta Saktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Surator Pangor Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsar Vaswa Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kalpudumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasana Sito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamanus Marami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venus Vaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samiti Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadmasukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susurabir Abhipali Antam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kwanandam Aravinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Prakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamadya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Jibanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti Pasyanti Pantikayanti Chayanti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achutam Anadim Anantarupa Madhyam Purana Purisham Navayovanamcha Vede Sadurlabha Madurlabha Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastukoti Satavatsada Sampragam Yova Yoratapi Manasomani Pungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagadanda Kotim Yashchakti Rasta Jagadanda Chayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramana Chayanta Rastam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Pratibhavita Bistabir Ya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhutto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Desu Vilokanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukala Niyamenatistan Anavatar Makarod Bhuvanesu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pamamyo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Pavarto Jagaranda Koti Koti Swasesya Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahmaniskanam Anantam Sesha Bhutam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Mayahi Yasya Jagaranda Satani Sute Trigunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sattva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasuya Prani Nam Patifalam Smaratam Upetya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijidamni Tale Chatasya Devi Maheso Haridama Sute 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 Te Prabhava Nichaya Vitascha Yena Govinda Madi Purisham Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shastistati Pralaya Sadhava Saktireka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga Ichana Rupam Apiyasya Chitestatesa Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Siram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasam Bhutam Apitata Samabhaitikarya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure the Santaram Abhyapetya Dipayate Vivite Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadrigeva Hicha Vishnu Tayavibhati Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narnava Jale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagananda Saroma Kupa Adhara Saktam Avalamya Param Swamurtim Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nishvasita Kalamatavalamya Jivante Loma Vilaja Jagananda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalaviseso Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakaleshana Jesu Teja Sriyam Kiyat Prakataya Tapitat Prutatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidai Kumbha Twande Pranama Samaya Radi Raja Vignam Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahika Ganamambu Maruti Sasya Kalas Tatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmat Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savitasa Kalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Sesha Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmota Papa Nichayas Sutayastapam Si Brahmadi Kita Patagava Deyasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakada Prabhava Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastindra Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Bandana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdhatit Kintu Bhakti Bhajam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Sahaja Pranadi Biti Vasaya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhavai Sanchinti Tesha Sadvisim Tanamaparete Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Drumabu Mishchintamani Ganama Itoyam Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Sipriyasaki Chiranandam Jati Param Apitad Asmadya Apicha Sayacha Shiradi Hishavadi Surabi Byasta Sumahan Nimesa Takyova Vajatina Hiyatrapi Samaya Bhaje Swita Dvitam Tamaham Iha Golakam Iti Yam Vedanta Station Takshati Virachari Kati Praye She Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I have my respectful basis unto Lotus Street is such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion with his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful basis unto Lotus Street of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful basis unto Lotus Street of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. For my respectful basis unto Lotus Street is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful basis unto Lotus Street is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble basis unto Lotus Street is such spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all real scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful basis unto Lotus Street as such spiritual master who's a bona fide representative of Sri Hari Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I should offer my respectful basis unto the Lotus Feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shrimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, Chapter 4, Text number 17. Mantre Sumam Va Upahuya Yatvam Akuntita Kanda Sadatma Bodha Priche Prabhu Mukta Iva Pramatas Tanno Mano Mohayati Vadeva. Mantresu, in consultations, Mam, unto me, Vai, as either, Upahuya, by calling, Yat, as much as, Tvam, your lordship, Akuntita, without hesitation, Akanda, without being separated, Sada, eternally, Atma, self, Bodha, intelligent, Pritche, asked, Prabhu, O my Lord, Mugda, bewildered, Eva, as if it were so, Apramata, although never bewildered, Tat, that, Na, our, Mana, mind, Mohayati, bewilders, Eva, as it is so, Deva, O my Lord. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time, and there is no limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus, you were sufficiently able to consult with yourself, yet you called upon me for consultation as if bewildered, although you are never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Uddhava was never actually bewildered, but he says that all these contradictions appear to be bewildering. The whole discussion between Krishna and Uddhava was meant for the benefit of Maitreya, who was sitting nearby. The Lord used to call Uddhava for consultation when the city was attacked by Jarasandha and others, and when he executed great sacrifices as part of his routine royal work as Lord of Dwarka. The Lord has no past, present, and future, because he is unhampered by the influence of eternal time, and thus nothing is hidden from him. He is eternally self-intelligent. Therefore, his calling for Uddhava to give him enlightenment is certainly astonishing. All these actions of the Lord appear to be contradictory, although there is no contradiction in the routine activities of the Lord. Therefore, it is better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time, and there is no limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus you were sufficiently able to consult with yourself, yet you called upon me for consultation as if bewildered, although you are never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. Go to Premanandi Haribol. We see here that Uddhava is confused by the behavior of Krishna. Why? Well, Krishna knows past, present, and future. So there's nothing that he doesn't know. But yet, he's consulting Uddhava for his enlightenment or for his advice on different issues, whether in Mathura or Dwarka. So this is bewildering to Uddhava, that the Lord knows past, present, and future, so why is he asking me to give him advice? Right? Well, this whole conversation is taking place for the benefit of Maitreya, who is not a completely pure devotee. He still has some mixed motives, whereas Uddhava has no mixed motives. He's completely dedicated to the service of the Lord. He's not under the influence in any way by karma and jnana and yoga. But still, he's bewildered by this transcendental, the transcendental Lord, who's above all ignorance, who knows past, present, and future, who is not subject to time, who is the controller of time, who is completely, causes fear to fear itself. Right? But yet, he acts in these contradictory ways. And this is explained in the previous verse. It says that there's no difference between the personality Godhead and the impersonal Brahman. How then can the Lord have so many things to do, whereas the impersonal Brahman is stated to have nothing to do, either materially or spiritually? Well, that's confusing, right? And Krishna explains this also in Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, where he says that he has nothing to do because he's perfectly self-sufficient in every way, but still he acts. And let's see where that is. Yeah, where he says, Name partas dikartavyam. This is 3:22. Trisu lokesu kinchana. Nanavaptam avaptavyam varta eva chakarmani. O son of Prita, there is no work prescribed for me within all the 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. So this is contradictory in a sense. But let's see what Prabhupada says in the purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described in the Vedic literatures as follows. Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Tam Devatanam Paramam Chadaivatam. Patim Patinam Paramam Parastad Vidama Devam Bhuvanesh Samidyam. Natasya Karyam Karanam Chavidyate. Natat Samas Chabhyadikas Chadristate. Parasya Sakti Vividaiva Shruyate. Swabhaviki Gyanavalakriyacha. The Supreme Lord is the controller of all other controllers, and he is the greatest of all the diverse planetary leaders. Everyone is under his control. All entities are delegated with particular power only by the Supreme Lord. They are not supreme themselves. He is also worshipable by all demigods and is the supreme director of all directors. Therefore, he is transcendental to all kinds of material leaders and controllers and is worshipable by all. There is no one greater than him, and he is the supreme cause of all causes. He does not possess bodily form like that of an ordinary living entity. There is no difference between his body and his soul. He is absolute. All his senses are transcendental. Any one of his senses can perform the action of any other sense. Therefore, no one is greater than him or equal to him. His potencies are multifarious, and thus his deeds are automatically performed as a natural sequence. Svatara Upanishad 6.7 and 8. Since everything is in full opulence in the personality of Godhead and is existing in full truth, there is no duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to perform. One who must receive the results of work has some designated duty, but one who has nothing to achieve within the 3 planetary systems certainly has no duty. And yet, Lord Krishna is engaged in the battlefield of Kurukshetra as the leader of the Kshatriyas because the Kshatriyas are duty-bound to give protection to the distressed. Although he is above all the regulations of the revealed scriptures, he does not do anything that violates the revealed scriptures. Well, now the answer to all this is the next verse, which says, Yadihi aham navarte yam chatukarmani atandrita mamavart manuvartante manusya partha sarva saha. For if I, meaning Krishna, ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, O Arjuna, certainly all men would follow my path. So he's saying, look, if I can do anything I want. If I break all the principles that I prescribe for others, then people would follow me, right? So, in order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life, there are traditional family usages meant for every civilized man, although such rules and regulations are for the conditioned souls and not Lord Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion. He followed the prescribed rules. He descended in this world to reestablish the principles of religion. So he also gives the example, and it says example is better than precept. This is a proverb in English. Prabhupada uses it often. That is, you can speak theoretically about something, and that's fine, but it's not as convincing as you actually doing those things. See? So then people say, well, wait a minute, as they say in colloquial English, he walks the walk and talks the talk. You ever hear that? He walks the walk and talks the talk. Why don't you look that up? He walks the walk and talks the talk. So, that's Krishna. He's explaining the rules and regulations of Sanatana Dharma, but he's also following them. And that is much more convincing than simply explaining them. So what does he say? Go ahead.
And talk the talk, walk the walk.
Right.
If you say that someone talks and talk but does not walk the walk, you mean that they do not act in a way that agrees with the things they say.
Right. There it is. So Krishna walks the walk and talks the talk and walks the walk. So, or as he says here, for if I've ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. So he doesn't have to. Anything he does is above any mundane activity or thought or desire. But to help others, he follows the rules and regulations like a conditioned soul. Not because he's conditioned, but to give the right example to others. And he says here, in order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life. See, that's the point. So, there are traditional family usages for every civilized man. So, for example, if your father dies or your mother dies, you have to go to Gaya and perform the adyeshti samskars, the final rites for the family members. So oftentimes, like, Ganapati and Yasoda Dalal and other people, this year they have to go to India for the first year, let's say, after the death of a family member, to perform certain, let's say, pujas in holy places with the help of brahmanas that say family duty. And then there are other things like, let's say someone dies in your family, so traditional Hindus will not come to the temple for a month or more, depending on what caste they have. And they won't chant Hare Krishna, things like that. So I've been asked that question many times. Radha Nila Madhava one day called me up and said, Prabhu, my family member died, and the Brahmanas in India told me that I shouldn't chant Hare Krishna, I shouldn't go to the temple. What should I do? So I told her, that's for traditional family duties for mundane or conditioned souls. But you are initiated, you're a devotee, and you promised that you would always chant Hare Krishna, and you should come to the temple, right, and do service. But you're not coming to the temple for material benefit, you're coming to the temple to do service. And you're not chanting for any material benefit, you're chanting to please the Lord. So therefore you should never stop doing that. Now, is that sacrilegious? I'm going against the Brahmanas in India. Well, it depends on the person. If the person is still a conditioned soul, then they should do those things. But if a person is living a transcendental life, that means engaged in devotional service, always chanting their rounds properly and following all the rules and regulations, they don't have to do those things. Because they're already satisfying their ancestors or people that have died in their family by offering food to Krishna and accepting it as prasadam, and chanting their rounds and following the regulative principles and doing service and going on Sankirtan and worshiping the deities. So therefore, all your relatives are being blessed and receiving punya by all those transcendental acts that a relative is performing. So there is a difference between a conditioned soul and a person who's liberated. So while we're doing devotional service, we are in a state of liberation. If we break the rules, if we stop our regulated activity, then we become conditioned again. Okay, so here Krishna doesn't have to do anything, but yet he does to give a good example for others. And then the next verse says, if I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put into ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So, now, if Krishna says that, imagine people who are breaking all the rules and regulations. They're actually creating unwanted population and destroying the peace of living beings because they're not following the principles of Sanatana Dharma or Krishna consciousness. And then it says, Varna Shankara is unwanted population which disturbs the peace of the general society. In order to check this social disturbance, there are prescribed rules and regulations by which the population can automatically become peaceful and organized for spiritual progress in life. When Lord Krishna descends, naturally he deals with such rules and regulations in order to maintain the prestige and necessity of such important performances. The Lord is the Father of all living entities, and if the living entities are misguided, indirectly, the responsibility goes to the Lord. Therefore, whenever there is general disregard of regulative principles, the Lord himself descends and corrects the society. We should, however, note carefully that although we have to follow in the footsteps of the Lord, we still have to remember that we cannot imitate him. Following and imitating are not on the same level. Very big statement. Following and imitating are not on the same level. Yeah, we can't imitate Krishna dancing with the gopis. We can't imitate Krishna living Govardhan Hill. By the way, he said, Prabhupada said once that before you dance with the gopis, first you have to lift Govardhan Hill. And he said, all these phonies, they can't even lift a table with their pinky, right? So how are they going to lift Govardhan Hills? Therefore, they have no right to dance with the gopis, or they. This is going on. You have, especially in Radha Kund, you have these sadhus who talk about Krishna's conjugal pastimes all the time, and they have girlfriends, and they engage in illicit activities, and it's a very dangerous thing, and that's right in Radha Kund, the holiest place in the universe, the holiest place in the universe, right? It's not just the holiest place on the earth; it's the holiest place in the universe. Because Krishna and Radharani had very, very intimate pastimes there, and with the gopis also. So, here we have, it's very confusing. Therefore, although we may be transcendently situated by engaging in devotional service, we have to follow all the rules and regulations. That's called sadhana bhakti. Why? It's to protect ourselves from ourselves, and to protect society from us. In other words, if we don't strictly follow all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, not only we will be a nonsense. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. One time, a long time ago in Paris, we would go out on Sankirtan every day. And there were about 6 of us at that time. And we'd go out every day, sometimes 16 hours a day. And there was one devotee, one day, he disappeared. Right? And then the next day he came to the temple. I said, Prabhu, where were you? And he said, well, I met this person and I was preaching, and they kept asking all these really great questions, and I just kept preaching, and I just lost track of time. I said, really? I said, can you tell me the gender of that person you were preaching to? He said, oh, it's just somebody I met. I said, I know, but what gender were they? He said, well, it was a woman. I said, okay. And you were up all night preaching? Is that what you're saying? Until, He said, yeah, I was preaching. I said, okay. You sure you didn't do any nonsense? He said, what do you mean? I was preaching all the time. I said, you know what I mean. He said, no, I was just preaching. Right? It turns out that he did do nonsense, right? And the little boy that was born, he was born with serious physical disabilities. And he eventually married that woman. But after some time, he left. Right? So, you see, as soon as there is a deviation from Krishna consciousness, there's going to be some kind of social upheaval. And that's a social upheaval, engendering illicit child. And then, worse than that, leaving after some time, because he didn't want to have to deal with the physical problems of the child. So a person that does a thing like that, that's a very sinful thing to do. And especially walking away from the responsibility. Right? Okay, so Krishna is saying, I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So he says, if I did not perform the prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put into ruination. So when Krishna was in Dwarka, he followed all the rules and regulations of Grihastas impeccably. And he established, the importance of these family traditions for people who are still conditioned. Now, let's say you become a devotee. Well, you still have duties, sadhana bhakti. You still have to follow rules and regulations. Maybe not exactly the same as conditioned souls that are like Hindus, but there's still regulations that we have to follow. Okay. And then he says, therefore, whenever there is general disregard of regulative principles, the Lord himself descends and corrects the society. We should, however, note carefully that although we have to follow the footsteps of the Lord, we still have to remember that we cannot imitate him. Following and imitating are not on the same level. So we have to follow his example as an ideal grihasta in Dwarka. But we should not try and imitate his activities, dancing with the gopis, lifting up Govardhan Hill. By the way, and like Prabhupada said, first you lift Govardhan Hill, then you can dance with the gopis. So that means nobody's going to dare do that. Okay. And it continues, it says, one should simply follow the instructions of the Lord and his empowered servants. Their instructions are all good for us, and any intelligent person will perform them as instructed. However, one should guard against trying to imitate their actions. One should not try to drink the ocean of poison in imitation of Lord Shiva. Yeah, Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison and kept it in his neck, right? And now people, they'll get a chillum and smoke some charas, or marijuana, and offer it first to Lord Shiva so that it becomes purified. That's complete nonsense. And there are a lot of people that do that in India, a lot, you know, and it's complete nonsense. And by the way, Lord Shiva is not a marijuana smoker, believe me. You know. But yeah, he did swallow poison. Marijuana is a type of poison, right? So, but he's not a dope head, you know, addicted to marijuana, you know, as these so-called Babajis do. I mean, you can go to Vrindavan and you'll see Babajis on the banks of the Yamuna smoking ganja. Have you ever seen that? Yeah. And they'll invite you. You know, they'll invite you as if, you know, this is part of the culture of Vrindavan. It's not really, but unfortunately these things happen. Okay, so there are many pseudo-devotees of Lord Shiva who want to indulge in smoking ganja, marijuana, and similar intoxicating drugs, forgetting that by so imitating the acts of Lord Shiva, they are calling death very near. Similarly, there are some pseudo-devotees of Lord Krishna who prefer to imitate the Lord in his Rasa Leela, or dance of love, forgetting their inability to lift Govardhan Hill. There it is. It is best, therefore, that one not try to imitate the powerful, but simply follow their instructions, nor should one try to occupy their posts without qualification. There are so many incarnations of God without the power of the Supreme Godhead. Wow. Prabhupada Ki Jai. And now the next verse says, this is all in the 3rd chapter, as the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. So now we see why we should always follow strictly the regulative principles. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, okay, the learned, or the devotees, may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. So what does that mean exactly? So let's read the purport. A person in Krishna consciousness and a person not in Krishna consciousness are differentiated by different desires. A Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not conducive to development of Krishna consciousness. He may even act exactly like the ignorant person who is too much attached to material activities, but one is engaged in such activities for the satisfaction of his sense gratification whereas the other is engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, the Krishna-conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So last night, I was talking to this one person after everything ended, and this person I was talking to is our biggest donor right now. Right? And then another man came in, who does a lot of service here, and he sat down and we started talking together. And at one point, I said to him, I said, "Oh, by the way," I said, "we're going to need some help." This is to the second person that came, And he's also a very wealthy person. I said, "We're going to need some help because we're coming near the end of the construction, but we're going to need your help to finish everything." And he understood what I said. I said, "Yeah, you can count on me." And he said, "I want to go and see the construction work going on." I said, "Sure. When do you want to go?" I said, "This next week." I said, "Okay, you just call me. We'll go and take a look at it." Right? And so we were talking a little bit more, and I explained to him, I said, "This person here that I'm talking to," that was the first person, I said, "he's our biggest donor," And I told him how much he's given, and he was like really impressed. And although they know each other somewhat, but then after that, they started talking with each other because he wanted to be, the second person wanted to be sure that this person is donating what I said he's donating, which is a huge amount of money. So, and that inspires him. That inspired him also. So here we see how there's a difference between people making a lot of money and spending it on sense gratification and a person who makes a lot of money and spends it on promoting Krishna consciousness. There's a major difference. They're both doing the same activity, gaining a lot of money, right? But one is using it for sense gratification and the other is using for progressing Krishna consciousness. And basically that's what's being said. It says, he may even act exactly like the ignorant person who is too much attached to material activities, but one is engaged in such activities for the satisfaction of his sense gratification, whereas the other is engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. It's beautiful statements by Prabhupada. And then the next verse, and we'll stop on that when it says, so as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. What a wonderful verse. Wonderful, wonderful verse. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, Vedaish Sarvir Aham Eva Vedya. That is the end of all Vedic rituals. All rituals, all performance of sacrifice, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. In other words, they study the Vedas to improve their sense gratification. So this is a problem because Prabhupada in another place, he says, the Vedas are like a rope. You can read them and get all tied up in sense gratification. So that's why reading is not enough. You have to hear from bona fide devotees so you don't get tied up into the Karmakanda section of the Vedas and then get just become basically a Vishaya, sense gratifier, in the name of the Vedas. Right? But rather, in the association of genuine devotees, one can be enlightened to understand the real purpose of the Vedas, which is Vedaischa Sarvir Aham Eva Vedya. That's the 15th chapter, 15th verse that says that, and I am to be known through all the Vedas. In other words, knowing Krishna is the goal of the Vedic knowledge. And when you know Krishna, you engage in his service. So that is the real purpose of Vedic knowledge. In other words, if you read the Vedas and you can quote Sanskrit and you know so many stories and so many things, but you're not engaged in devotional service, you have not understood the Vedas. Because the whole purpose of the Vedas is to be firmly situated with determination in devotional service and always glorifying Krishna. Okay, so then it says, but because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end, for that purpose of sense gratification. They're studying the Vedas for sense gratification, not for purification. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. So that's why last night I was very happy that the second person came, because I wanted him to know what the first person was doing, and to the extent of that first person, because both have equal positions in companies. They're both very highly placed, and they're both making a lot of money. So there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money if you use it in Krishna's service. There's a lot wrong with making a lot of money and just using it for sense gratification. So there has to be some examples of people who make a lot of money and use it in Krishna's service, right? Whether they make a lot of money or they make a little money, but they're using whatever extra money they have in the service of the Lord. It doesn't matter whether you're making millions of dollars or you're just making a few $1,000s. There has to be something left over for the service of Krishna, right? So just like Kolavacha Sridhar, he was a very poor guy. He would sow leaves and make them into little cups and plates, and then he would so he would set down a little rag of cloth, and then he would set on it all those little cups and bowls that he made with leaves, and sowing the leaves. And then he would have a few vegetables, like one or two squashes or something like that. And Lord Chaitanya would come every day to see him, and he would always steal squash. And the man, and Kolavacha Sridhar said, why are you doing this? He said, I'm a poor man. You're stealing my squash. And Lord Chaitanya said, yes, but when it's stolen, it tastes much better. So they had this transcendental relationship going. Not that he would do that every day, but they had this relationship because Lord Chaitanya knew that this Kolavacha, he was a pure devotee. But he was very poor, but every day, whatever he earned, which was just not even 1 rupee, right? At that time, this is like 500 years ago. But he would use half of it for worshiping Ganga Devi, and the other half for maintaining himself, right? So he was a pure devotee, and Lord Chaitanya recognized that. So he would see him regularly, and they would have these exchanges, loving exchanges. So although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals. See, there it is right there. Because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. So that's why I told that one devotee lady look, although the brahmanas called you up, or you called them to get advice of what you should do after somebody died in your family, you don't have to follow this rule about don't go to the temple, don't chant, don't offer your food, don't do this, don't do that for 1 month or 2 months or 5 months or 6 months. I said, because you promised to do those things at initiation, and these things are transcendental activities. They're not mundane, ritualistic activities. So therefore, you just continue chanting, you come to the temple, you do your service, etc. And here it says also, for a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. So that doesn't mean we have no prescribed duties, but our prescribed duties are a little different than the prescribed duties for people still conditioned. Right? So our prescribed duties have to be strictly followed. No meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, always chanting Hare Krishna, always offering your food and eating only prasadam, always associating with devotees, always worshipping the deity, going out on Sankirtan, and regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. These duties have to be followed. Okay. So I think we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Just a addition on that, Maharaj, that you had mentioned about if someone died in the family and not coming to temple. So in my childhood, when my father passed away, so I was very perplexed with that same concept. I was surprised, we are not going to temple anymore. We are not even doing worship at home for many days.
Yeah.
So I was very confused because I was kid as well, but because we were doing every day, like going temple, doing a lot of puja at home, and everything just stopped. And everyone prescribing, oh no, you cannot do it. I said,
because
okay.
They consider that the family members are in a state of contamination because of the deaths in the family. Yeah. So therefore, you shouldn't do any of these things. Yeah.
It was very confusing at that time. Like when we need Krishna at the most that time, and we are not worshipping at all.
It is confusing. Well, see, when they're conditioned souls, then they're already contaminated, right? Because they're mixed. So they might, like on Diwali, they might smoke some ganja because everybody else is smoking ganja on Diwali, right? So they do different things that are habitual, but not necessarily pure, and so they're mixed. Whereas the devotee, if they follow strictly, they're not mixed, so they don't have to do these mundane types of rituals or rules. Because they're directly involved in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. It is confusing, huh? You see? That's why you have to have the association of devotees, so to clear the doubts. And then you have to hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, where all these things are answered. All these questions are answered. But you have to have the patience to hear it on a regular basis. And whatever we hear, we have a tendency of forgetting, so there has to be repetition also. Good. Hari Bol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You see how everything is in this one book, Bhagavad Gita. It's amazing.
It's so powerful, Maharaj, that it can remove so many doubts.
Yeah.
Probably the reason that it still remains in this world.
What?
It's probably the reason that this book is still remain in this world, because a lot of scriptures have been died in it
Yeah,
they
this is-
burned it or lost or something, but this is going to be there forever.
This was preserved. You have to thank the Vaishnava Acharyas. They preserved it. So we have everything necessary to go back to Godhead. Now the question is, do we want to go back to Godhead? You have to be convinced that that should be the goal of life. So when you're engaged in devotion, pure devotional service, you are back to Godhead already. Go ahead, you can start.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandho Mui Savadana Mate
Ando Mui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bai Ebava Toriya Jai
Janara Prasade Bhat Eva Toriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hote
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hote
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitite Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Akya
Arana Kori Ho Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dila jai janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se
Chakshudan dila jai janme janme Prabhu se
Divya Gyan Hruday Prakashito
Gyan de Prakashito
Prema भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकेनाथ लोकेर जीवाना हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया एबे जास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने
कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद चैतन्य
प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य
चैतन्य
प्रभु
नित्यानंद
श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे
हरे हरे
हरे राम 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 हरे हरे
बोलो हरे कृष्ण
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada.
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jai Guru Deva.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol, Jai Shri Radha Krishna. Jai O Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajikachasta Tarasatara Shri Shimari's Divine Graces Shri Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kundu Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Dham Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai, Nikai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Assembled Devotees, all glories to the Assembled Devotees, all glories to the Assembled, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Namo Om Vishnu Jaya Krishna Krishna Bhakti Shivata Bhakti Vedanta Swanta Dhamani Naste Saraswati Devi Gurvani Pujari Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Satarine Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol.
The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and Master of devotees. O Lokinath Goswami, O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your frame is spread all over the three worlds.
We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Go ahead.